treat to have Matt and come out on this cold and rainy night, and all of you, but
I guess we have an extra chair, so anyone who wants a chair.
there's a few familiar faces in this audience.
Well, do you want to have a seat?
I don't know, then they can't see you so well, so maybe we just stand.
All right, we can stand. Well, you are obviously a native of New Zealand, so was Margaret. But her career was mostly in the U.S. where it launched. How did you hear about her and then get interested and say, yes, I want to direct a film about her?
Joe Duran, who was that you saw in the film, her best friend, sent me a cold email, and I was possessed by I don't know what to make all these crazy promises that I would find the money and I would find the producers and we'll find a director, and then I was in too deep and there was no backing out. And by and by, we were like, who are we going to get to direct this? And I said, why don't you? I was like, don't be silly, I don't direct. And then I realized, of course I should direct. Nobody cares about this like me. That initial possession, whatever controlled me to say these very uncharacteristic things, was the kind of commitment you need to stick with it day in, day out for years on end until the job's done. So I'm very grateful to him.
I was fascinated by how you start the film with this relationship, unusual relationship with her 17-year-old boyfriend. I'm thinking, oh, he's the coolest kid in school. My 30-year-old girlfriend. But
Yeah.
that's a really interesting approach, and you know, certainly signals to us that Margaret was a very different person in terms of how she lived her life.
Yeah, I think a lot of films about war camera people are kind of, ain't they just grand? Everything about them's amazing, and you know, they kind of, you sanctify them a bit, and that doesn't interest me. She wasn't like that. She owned her sins. She was really honest about all of it, and I would never make a film like that. I want to tell the truth as far as I understand it about anything, because I think our flaws are what connect us. I think it's really important to reveal the human spirit. That's what interests me, and to entertain you. Secondly,
As an actor, or was part of you tempted, like, wow, I would love to play Margaret Moth? I mean, what an extraordinary character! And did you maybe think about, should this be a fictionalized adaptation?
we considered that. I must say I was never tempted to want to play it. I would rather direct than act, to be honest. Besides, by the time she's my age, she's you know, going through cancer, and you probably need somebody who doesn't look like me. Who, you know, somebody, I don't know, who looks a little scrawnier, maybe. I don't know. What was the first part of that question?
Well, I guess deciding to do it as a documentary, you
Right.
could have done it as a fictional adaptation.
Yeah.
You know, whether it was you playing the role or someone else.
Yeah.
But
And that seemed like a really long way to go about it. We would have to find the writer, the right writer, write the scripts, shape it. I'd have to do all the interviews anyway, and COVID was breathing down our necks. So I just got started with a friend in America and just went and interviewed people willy-nilly. Like, I did not know what I was doing. I'd never interviewed anybody before. But I think maybe that helped, because I would ask the actor questions and not the journalist question. So I'm going to ask about the circus.
Tell me what the actor questions are.
Well, the actor question, when he says she was the ringleader, or she was in the circus, I'm going to ask a follow-up question about the circus. You know, who are you in the circus? Whereas a journalist might not.
Yeah.
Because they're going for facts. They're going for to educate you and be really rigorous with objective facts. And I kind of do believe in objective truth, but maybe not facts, because people's subjective impressions and memories are so much more interesting to me, especially when they don't line up. You know, because you're going, wait a minute, he said that, but Yoshika said that. Now the family says. Now who do you believe? So I'm going to make their problems yours. My job is to put all their issues in your lap, and you have to figure out how you feel about it, rather than me trying to tell you how to feel about anything.
Yeah, you're not trying to resolve it for us. Let
No.
us live in ambiguity.
Super tempting, you know, but I sometimes I couldn't, because the players, the interviewees, didn't have any insight into their own condition. Like the family, because they're raised by such emotional neglect. they didn't even know that they didn't feel that they were treated badly. And I said to her sister, Jan, gosh, Jan, I wish they had cuddled you more. And she looked at me like, she never considered that she deserved better treatment as a child. So because I'm not going to insert myself and tell you what my impression of it, I don't have a narrator in there. I need to let them tell their stories. Unfortunately, you have to infer. But there wasn't any sexual abuse, it was just neglect, emotional neglect. And those ghastly pictures are really Margaret's own interpretation of her inner life, I guess.
I thought the artwork is really quite extraordinary. I was thinking about on the way over that it's almost like they're illustrations to an Edgar Allan Poe story. I mean, they're so visceral.
And I don't know if you noticed, and these were done some years before she was shot, but she's holding her jaw in like 4 of these pictures.
Oh my.
It's so peculiar, something bizarrely, some bizarre precursor to.
Speaking of the family, I'm curious of how willing or they were to be interviewed, or whether there was some persuasion involved.
Not that much, actually, but fortunately, because I'd been Xena Warrior Princess, people will take my call, at least, and they're kind of curious, they're like, and Xena was really popular in Australia, where they all now live, and they're like, yeah, but it makes perfect sense that Xena would make a film about our sister, and so, they are all so bloody-minded, because they have no self-pity, like Margaret had no self-pity, that they don't. I was nervous. How would they feel about me portraying, Jan saying, oh, the buckled wraparound, she's laughing. And I showed it to them, and she just texted right back, bloody good film, like, good on you, Liz. And I love them, but they don't love one another. No, the neglect has gone on and on and on. Yeah. It's intergenerational. There's lots of crazy stuff that I couldn't put in the film because it's not about Margaret. You just have to winnow everything down and keep it about Margaret, keep it tight,
Mm-hmm. Obviously, by the nature of being a war photographer, she's not turning the camera on herself. So that's going to limit the number and kinds of shots that you have. You have some still photos, you have random and stray shots that other photographers may have captured. So therefore, that elevates the importance of the diorama that you created, which is quite a remarkable sequence, recurring sequence in the film. But can you talk about the creation of those?
Yeah, the problem with diorama, especially as you say, in a film where there is a dearth of images, you got to create stuff. So we were like, do we do it with actors? That's really expensive, and we've all seen that. That's a whole boring, got a cast and blah blah blah. Should we do animation? Well, again, it's expensive, it takes a really long time. And Matthew, it wasn't me, but Matthew Metcalf, the EP, said, what about a diorama? And as a child of the 70s, I went, oh, yeah. I was like, this is our CGI, right? Who made diorama in shoeboxes and things? Yeah, see, look at that. We all know diorama, right? So everything kind of comes from my childhood, the understanding of that part of it, from the diorama and also the sound. Like when I was a child, if those of you who are old enough to remember, there was tons of submarine movies. And it was creepy watching a submarine movie because they're all down in this claustrophobic, echoing, scary environment, and everything's sort of juddery and slow motion. So I tried to create that feeling with sound design, which is, because it's subliminally, it stresses you out. So that was, you're welcome. Because you know something awful's coming, right? And then you've got to pay it off. Yeah.
I don't know about the folks in here who made dioramas. I don't think mine as a kid were historically accurate. So how do you do the research to, reconstruct the, Sniper Alley and things like that? I mean, that's a really
Yeah, well, there's tons of photographic evidence of what it looked like. So it is actually remarkably accurate. And then Weta, who did Lord of the Rings and all that stuff, who deigned to come and do our little project out of respect for Margaret, they made sure they figured out the depth perception, the perspective, so that it might look like it's 2 kilometre or mile deep, but it's 25, 30 feet deep. And they just make the buildings far away smaller, so. But it was a jolly big diorama. You could stand on it and,
Oh, wow. Yeah. And, Christiane Amanpour talks about that. So interesting of her saying, like, feeling like it was Russian roulette to be there, and that some of her instinct, and not only her, but probably other war correspondents, was you're there for a little bit, and you got to get out of there. You're just taking too many risks.
Yeah.
But in the case of Margaret, I mean, she was a passenger in a vehicle when she was shot. I mean, this is a terrible irony. She was not shot of like, yeah, I'm getting this dangerous shot, of this that I need.
Yeah.
So this,
She felt very strongly that she was not cavalier with her life at all. Other people said she was. Jeff said she was, but Jeff wasn't there. And she strongly felt that she was not cavalier. She made calculated risks. But nevertheless, she opted to stay, and they were urging her to get out. And she says, I don't know why, I just want to stay. You get trauma bonded to the theatre of war. And that's why when we went to talk to Christiane, Russia had just gone into Ukraine, and all the journalists were freaking out. I cannot believe that she deigned to give us 40 minutes of her time, because every word was gold, and that's a mark of her respect for a fallen comrade.
Think of some questions if you have them. I will come to you in just a sec, but before I forget, I did want to ask about how Margaret chose her name. I mean, it's rather unusual. Moth, I mean, where'd she come up with that?
Yeah, weirdly, she had a phobia of moths when she was a kid. If they were flipping on the window, as they do, she would, lots of screaming, and also of steel wool for some reason, and her brothers and sisters would chase her around with steel wool. So she was a really sensitive kid, but actually the name change came because she liked to jump out of tiger moths, and she wanted to be Margaret Tiger Moth, but New Zealand bureaucracy at the time would not allow it. It wasn't feminine enough. So, yet she did manage to get her tubes tied, so that was quite an amazing feat, I had to go to court for that.
That's an interesting story. Yes, you had a question?
Yes, I have a craft question, even though I have many questions about this. So, at what point did you and your editor and screenwriters feel the spine of her narrative came together? Since most of the, as far as I understand documentary, most of the writing comes at the tail end of collecting footage. At what point did you feel like you had a strong sense of how the narrative would look?
Yeah, you're so right. I think we nailed the beginning quite early. And we did toss up whether we ought to do a story about her life in New Zealand as a young adult, because it's really interesting and quite gnarly. But somehow the strongest place to start was Amnesiac shows up and takes up with a 17-year-old, and off they go to punk clubs, and then war, boom, barracuda. So it's something to make you sit up and take notice, so you realize you're not watching your average biopic. It's going to be a bit twisty, and what? Got to hook people's attention, especially if you're streaming, because they've got so many other options. You get like 20 seconds. So, not to be cynical, but that was a big part of, I've learned from making television that your first episode of any new show, you need some shock and awe to get the chat going. Otherwise, you're dead.
Yes.
So I'm certain that you have hours and hours and hours of unseen footage. What's some of your favorite that you could have put in there that you'd like to tell us about?
Yeah, what got left on the cutting room floor?
Well, you do know I found her teeth.
Oh my God.
Yes, I found her teeth.
Wow.
Okay,
In the back.
That's part of the story, though.
In the back of the driver's head.
Oh!
Yes, that they shattered into a billion fragments, and for years, he said 6 or 7 years, he still had pieces of Margaret's teeth coming out when he'd wash his hair and go, what's that little, pink? So, and I thought Margaret would love that. And I was like, I just want to put it in the end credits. And the New Zealand Film Commission was like, please don't do it. It's so disrespectful to Margaret. And I was like, I don't think so, but yeah, it kind of didn't fit. Tonally, it didn't fit. So.
That's a Alexa Crow being a detective.
You know, one other thing that I couldn't put on the story, she was very badly hassled by police in her city because she had had the temerity to be the camera person for a group of women's series, the women's series, and they filmed the issue of rape within marriage, because in those days you could not possibly rape your wife, no matter what you did. So they filmed the wife of a vice cop, allegedly, and that made her a target. The rest of the crew left, but Margaret was targeted, and that was part of her reason for
Was that
getting out of
Houston
Dodge.
or-
No, in New Zealand.
In New Zealand, okay.
And I didn't tell that story also because I couldn't corroborate it, and it would be a big legal problem. And it's more about New Zealand than Margaret, so yeah.
You have a question?
How long was it? I'm the producer of Xena documentary, by the way. So I'm going through that same
That's
thing right
cool.
now. How
Xena
long was it?
They want to talk.
Go on with your story.
How long was it from start to finish?
How long was it from start to finish is the question.
2.5 years from that email to Sundance. Yeah.
Which is pretty much lightning speed for a
Amazing.
documentary.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I was just wondering what surprised you the most over the course of making this film?
Well, I love sound design. Blows my mind. It's a whole world. You can. It's a whole virtual reality that you walk into, and that's the most thrilling technical aspect for me. The most interesting thing was about truth and subjectivity, and then also about people who routinely face death to bring us the truth. And it's so beleaguered these days. They need our protection. Journalists are under threat like never before. Whistleblowers, we're imprisoning them, even if we really need to know what they have to say. I think truth tellers that surprised me, how pertinent that is to today.
Thank you. Let's make time for a couple more. I think I saw your hand first.
Even though it's such an integral part of her story,
Your voice is soft. Yeah, sorry.
even though it's such an integral part of her story, given how polarized the world is today regarding the Israel-Palestine issues going on, was there any hesitation about including that footage and that being part of the narrative?
Well, it locked like 2 weeks before October 7. We had no idea this was going to happen.
Oh.
And apart from the shock and disbelief of the initial event, there was the terror of what must follow. And I didn't really talk about it on Twitter because I thought my ability to do good here is nil. My ability to spread, hatred or whatever is not insignificant. And I did think that our film would be dead after that, like nobody would see it. But I think because my compact with Margaret, my promise to her, was to be as non-judgmental as her about the sex, the drugs, the relationships, and that followed through into the conflicts. It was because she had a very cold eye about these things and brutally realistic. So I just tried that was my promise to her before any of that happened. And I think that's probably why we didn't get politicized. And the way that their footage is treated, these journalists, the ones I talk to, is what happens at the editorial level is above their pay grade. They're busy dodging bullets. They're not able to control those things. That's a different issue. But those people who are out there, as we sit here now, are facing incalculable dangers, doing just what Margaret did. She was no better than them, and they're amazing human beings.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that you got such a great interview with Tom Johnson, who was the head of CNN, to offer that perspective of people who are above and making some of those decisions,
Yeah.
about what gets into, on screens and what doesn't. Maybe we can squeeze in one more question. Oh my gosh, there's so many. You?
Me?
Yes?
Leather jacket? Okay.
Yeah, no jacket.
It seems to me like your life's theme has a lot to do about justice. You do a lot for Greenpeace, and this now. Do you see anything ahead? Delving into it, like I'm always so interested in what you do on social media. I learn a lot from you that way. Do you have anything coming up?
Well, do you think that anything unfair is going to happen? I think it's kind of a growth industry, isn't it? I don't know. Of course, there's always going to be. There's lots of craziness going against Greenpeace at the moment with the oil companies who know if they target activists, they don't have to pay the fines. Witness the Stephen Donziger case. There's always going to be things for us to stand up against, isn't there? So we've just got to do it wisely and be effective and not get not cut ourselves off and not get jaded and frightened. Yeah. So undoubtedly there'll be more to come.
I think that was very much how Margaret Moth approached her life and her work, certainly. Let's congratulate Lucy Lawless.
Thank you very much.
The film has qualified for the Academy Awards. So tell your friends.
Yeah, tell your friends. If you guys are, it's for the first round. It's not like we're, have a nomination, but it's nice to be included. So,
Did you submit to the Producers Guild?
Pardon?
Did you submit to the Producers Guild?
Did I?
PGA.
I'll ask.
They nominated for Best Picture.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming out.